Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today I wanted to do my NEWTs Readathon 2019 wrap up. My goal for this NEWTs Readathon was to read 8 books so I could join the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes at the Ministry of Magic, and I'm very happy to announce that I was able to complete that goal. I finished 8 books in the month of August. That is definitely the most books I've read in a single month since I became like a everyday functional adult who like works a 9-to-5 job and has, you know, bills to pay and whatnot. So kudos to me for doing that. I'm quite proud of myself. I think the key was basically breaking down the books and the number of pages that I needed to read per day in order to accomplish that goal. Now that I have accomplished it though, I figured I would share my thoughts on the books that I read. I'll just go through the books in the order that I read them, and I'll also mention which particular exam it helped me pass. The first book that I read was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was for the A in Charms, which was to read a book with a gorgeous cover, and I absolutely love the UK edition of this book. The cover is so pretty. This is an ARC copy, but the cover is very similar to the final version in the UK. So I love looking at this cover, and I also really love this book. General opinions seem to be middling to positive about it, so I went in with like reasonable expectations. I haven't read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo yet, and I wanted to read this one first because people generally seem to hold that book in higher regard, so I figured I'd start with the one that people were a little more wishy-washy on and go to her better one. I really enjoyed my reading experience with this book. Daisy Jones, the character, and all of the band members of the Six, they really come alive for you in this book. I was listening to a lot of music while I was reading this, mostly music without lyrics, or at least music I didn't know the lyrics to, and I thought that really just added to the ambiance of the story. I read this book quite quickly. I mean, it certainly helps that it's done interview style, so you're not reading huge blocks of text at a time. I just wish there had been a little bit more at the end. I felt like we got so much about how Daisy Jones came to be and how the band came to be and how they came together, but once things sort of happened and the band broke up, which is this whole book is finding out why the band broke up, once we actually found that out, I felt like the story ended way too quickly. I wanted more. I would have definitely read 50 more pages of this book had I been able to, so I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars for that reason. The next book I read was a graphic novel that I borrowed from the library, and that was Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This was for the Exceeds Expectations in Charms, which is to read a comic book, graphic novel, manga, or something under 150 pages. And this was not a lot of text and, you know, pictures on every page, so it was a really fast read, which was great, and it was exactly what I wanted it to be. There was some creepy stories that I really liked, and then there were some creepy stories that I thought were pretty good. If I had been reading this on like Halloween night with candles and like to the right ambiance, I think it really could have stuck with me, but I definitely enjoyed it for what it was, so I decided to give it 4 stars because I felt like it was definitely better than sort of a mid 3, but not good enough to like blow me out of the water, but definitely exactly what I was looking for. The next book I read was for the Acceptable in Transfiguration, and that is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This fit the challenge for reading a book with LGBTQA+ representation, and this is a well-loved book on BookTube. I'd heard about it for a long time and had tried to read it at one point and just wasn't really feeling it, but this time I pushed through. Not that I had to push too much. I really enjoyed the characters in this book, and I enjoyed the messages and the problems that our characters dealt with. The writing was not really for me though, so that kind of took away from it a little bit. Every time I put the book down and went back to it, it took a while for me to get back into the flow of the writing because it is definitely unique and not a writing style that I would typically enjoy. However, because the characters were strong and the problems that they faced seemed realistic and they were handled well. I ended up enjoying this book enough to give it 4 stars. I don't think I'd necessarily be really into the idea of reading another one of Jandy Nelson's books just because of the writing, but for what this book was, I thought it did a really good job with it. The 4th book that I finished was The Rose Society by Marie Lu, and this was for the Exceeds Expectations and Transfiguration, which was to read a book that is not the first in the series. This is the 2nd book in the Young Elites series. I didn't have super high expectations going into this. When I read the Young Elites earlier this year, I had very low expectations and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. I liked the darkness that was there. I liked the world. I liked the powers, the superpowers, magical powers, whatever you want to call them, that our characters have. So when I picked up The Rose Society, a lot of times you kind of get the slump with the 2nd book, but I did not find that to be the case with this book. I was really, really liking this when I first picked it up. So much so that I was even more excited for it, I think, than in certain parts of the Young Elites. This book would have been a 4.5 stars for me, except halfway, 3/4 of the way through the book, there was a love triangle introduced, and it didn't feel right. It didn't feel necessary. There is a 3rd book in this series, so I think it is just a trilogy, and I imagine that will come into play in the last book, but this was sort of introducing that, and I could kind of see where the author was going with it, but I don't care. I didn't want it there. I wanted the powers, I wanted the fighting, I wanted the morally gray choices, and so this book was going so well for me, and then it just, yeah. By the way, if you want to hear some more thoughts about I'll Give You the Sun and a bit more about the Rose Society, I did do a vlog for a 24-hour readathon vlog of just because, so I will link that if you want to go check that out. This was going to be 4.5 stars, but then I settled on 4. I will definitely be reading the final book, or at least what I think is the final book in this series, because I do want to see what happens. But yeah, that love triangle, I was just like, why? Next, I finished The Silent Patient by Alex McAlides. I had this going since the first day of the readathon and was just sort of listening to it in bits and pieces while I was reading physical books as well. And this was thanks to my sister who has an Audible account. She let me get this book. I basically said, let's get this book together. You're gonna like it. I think you're gonna like it. And I would also like to check it out. So thanks to her. The Silent Patient was for the Acceptable in Potions. That was to read your friend's favorite book. And I sort of did a little spit on this and actually just went on Twitter and asked for people's favorite books that they'd enjoyed recently or ever. And this was one of the books that was recommended to me, and I had already had a bit of interest in it, so I decided to select it. It's like a psychological thriller, I guess you could say, mystery, and those genres all kind of blend together a lot of the time these days. We have an artist who apparently has this idyllic life with her husband, and one night her husband comes home from work and she ends up shooting him 5 times in the face, killing him, and then she doesn't speak again. And so you're trying to find out why she did this. And so you are reading from diary entries from the artist, and then you're also reading from the perspective of the psychotherapist who is trying to help her and trying to figure out what's going on. There were certain parts of this book that I really enjoyed. There was some tension and build-up, and the mystery to a certain extent was good. And then I felt like I wanted more. Sort of 3/4 of the way through the book, I was feeling it. I was engaged. I wanted to know what was going to happen. I wanted to know what the heck was going on. And then when we actually got the answer to it, I was like, okay. And then I felt like everything after that just was sort of meh. I didn't guess what the ending was. After I went online and so sort of reading opinions, they do seem to be kind of mixed. Some people felt like they figured out what was going on pretty early on and they were not that enthused by it. I'm not one to usually figure out what the great mystery is, so that certainly wasn't the aspect of why I didn't like it. I just think I wanted more, but I can't really articulate what it is that I wanted more of. In the end, I settled on 3.5 stars for this book. The sixth book that I read was Gathering Darkness by Morgan Rhodes. This is for the Acceptable in Defense Against the Dark Arts. The prompt for that was to read a book with black under the dust jacket, which this obviously has. This is the third book in the Fallen Kingdom series. I've read the first two books earlier this year, so the plot is very fresh in my mind. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I can't say too much about it because a lot of it's going to spoil the first 2 books, but basically this is YA fantasy that revolves around elementia, which is magic based on the elements, earth, air, fire, water in this case. And we follow a huge cast of characters who are between the ages of like 16 and 18-ish when the books start. This book was stronger than the second book. I also rated the second book 3 stars. I rated the first one 4 stars. I think I was just pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. This one, I felt like there was more plot progression, which I liked. I felt like the second one kind of didn't go anywhere in the end, and this one felt like it went more places, and not as many people died in this one. One of the things that was starting to piss me off was the author was killing off so many characters that I liked, that I was like, who's going to be left to tell this story? This one, she didn't kill as many people, which is good because there's only so many people that you can kill. But as far as whether I will continue with this series, the first 3 books I had in my possession already, so it's much easier to just pick up the book when you already have it sitting there. But in terms of getting the 4th book and going on with this series, I'm definitely starting to lose interest in it just because I feel like it's sort of plateauing and it's not getting any better. Maybe this could have been shorter and some certain things could have been cut out and maybe I would like it more. I just feel like there's a lot of filler stuff that it could have been condensed a bit more and I would have liked it better. If you've read this series, let me know if you think the books get stronger, because I thought 1 was pretty strong and now 2 and 3 have both been kind of in the middle. So if you think 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it's up to now, if you think it gets better, stronger, let me know. The second to last book that I finished was Obsidium by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This was for the Outstanding in Transfiguration, which was to read a book over 500 pages. And I got lucky because this book is actually slightly over 600 pages, but it is a mixed media book, so it's way faster to read than a regular 500-page book. If I did not have this book and I actually had to pick a book with 500 pages that was solid text, I don't know if I could have completed this. I don't know if I could have read all 8 books in August, but I did, and it might be partially thanks to this book. This is also the 3rd book in a series, but this is the final book in the Illuminae Files trilogy, also another very well-loved series on BookTube, and I really enjoyed the finale of this one. Illuminae was so great when I read it, and then Gemina felt like a rehash of Illuminae. There was so many things that were so similar, and it kind of made me a little angry because I felt like they just sort of recycled the same plot. This one brought the characters from Illuminae and Gemina together, plus introduced us to a couple new characters and mixed it all together, and I really appreciated how this all played out. I gave the first 2 books 4 stars as well, though the 4-star for Gemina was definitely like a 4. This one is another solid 4, like Illuminae. I was really happy with how it ended up. I mean, it was sort of, the ending was almost a little too happy, but I think I'm going to do a trilogy series review of the 3 books, and I'll kind of really wrap up my thoughts and get to say a lot more in that, so look for that at some point in the future. And finally, the last book that I finished for the NEWTs Readathon was for the Outstanding in Charms, which was to read a paperback book, and I decided to read Transgender History, The Roots of Today's Revolution by Susan Stryker. This is a nonfiction book about transgender history since the mid-1800s, mostly focusing on the United States. It is very much a primer, but that's exactly what I needed. The first 45 pages of this book is just going over different terms, old and new, that are used in this book and would be used when you're talking about transgender history. I found that quite helpful. From there, it's broken down into different sections and sort of follows the timeline starting in the 1850s-ish and all the way up until present day, basically. This is the second edition of the book, which was published in 2017, so it's present as of about late 2016. I would absolutely recommend this book to somebody that is looking to understanding more about transgender history and the LGBT community as a whole. There is some stuff in here that gets pretty academic and kind of technical, and that can be a little difficult to get through at times, but generally I'd say like 85% of the book I found to be engaging and easy to understand. I gave this 4 stars. That's definitely a theme with this readathon, is how strong the books were in terms of what I chose to read, which is great. This is one of those books that I'm definitely going to keep on my shelves in case I ever want to revisit certain sections of it or use it to reference a question I may have in the future. That's it. Those are the 8 books that I managed to start and finish in August, which I'm very pleased about. If you guys participated in the NEWTs, let me know how you did down below. If you have any comments on any of the books that I read, feel free to share those as well. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.